Have you ever wondered why some people can change the energy of a room without saying a single word? They don't shout. They don't beg. They just withdraw. And suddenly everything becomes different. People start questioning, chasing after them, trying to feel something. Now think. What would happen if you did the same? What would happen if you stopped reacting to everything instantly, chose silence instead of automatic responses, preferred withdrawal instead of explosions? This is where you come face to face with a truth that will change your life. The day you stop being emotionally, physically, and psychologically available and ready at all times, the world around you enters a small crisis. Because people are so used to controlling you. They know your reactions, they calculate your impulses, they think you're predictable. But the moment you choose to withdraw, the rules of the game change. And the people who are so sure they knew you realize they actually know nothing about you. You know what Carl Jung said? Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Now stop for a second and think about this. When you become unreachable, who becomes desperate? Who starts getting angry? Who tries to provoke you just to elicit some emotion, just to get some reaction? This speaks more about that person than about you. And, more importantly, it reveals how manipulated you've been without even realizing it. You've always done the same thing. You've given yourself away to keep people who were never truly by your side, to please, to keep the peace, to make yourself loved. With every forced yes, with every instant response, with every emotional reaction, you've destroyed a part of your energy. And what's left at the end of the day? Exhaustion, disappointment, an inexplicable feeling of emptiness inside. Shall I tell you why? Because you're far too accessible to people who aren't worth even a minute of your silence. This is a situation that drains you from within and devalues you in their eyes. But let's not be misunderstood here. This isn't about turning your back on the world. It's about choosing yourself. It's about learning what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, authentic, complete. And this process begins the day you understand that silence can sometimes be more powerful than 1,000 arguments. So now I'm asking you, looking you straight in the eyes, how much longer will you be controlled by others' emotional needs? How much longer will you continue to react like a puppet every time someone touches your wound? Perhaps it's time to cut those strings, to withdraw, to be a mystery. Because when you stop being accessible, everything changes. You were taught that you always need to be available, that you need to respond quickly, to please, to say yes, even when you want to say no. Since childhood, you've been told that your worth is measured by how accessible you are to others. But there's a truth that perhaps has never been told to you this clearly. This constant accessibility is not a virtue, it's a prison. And as long as you continue to think you need to be accessible always, every moment, in every way, you will be manipulated, consumed, and discarded when you're no longer useful. Why? Because being always accessible makes you predictable. And everything predictable eventually becomes a tool. People start using you as an emotional emergency button. They press it when they want attention, when they want comfort, when they want approval. Then they put you back on the shelf, but you don't even realize it. Because you're caught in the delusion that being there for everyone will somehow ensure someone will be there for you. But life doesn't work that way. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, that mask we wear to be accepted, loved, recognized. And it's precisely this mask that makes you overly accessible. You say, "I'm fine," while drowning. You respond to messages instantly, even when exhausted. You explain, defend, Justify yourself as if you owe the world something. But here's the truth. The more you put yourself at the center of others' stage, the further you move from your own life. Being always accessible is a subtle form of self-betrayal, a disguised way of seeking approval, avoiding rejection, trying to control others' perception of you. But this control comes at a heavy price, and that price is your peace, your vital energy that you distribute as if it were unlimited. Yet that energy is limited, very limited. Here's the painful part. People who want you always accessible don't actually want you. They want what you provide: approval, companionship, distraction, emotional comfort. But when you change, when you set a boundary, when you refuse to react, the same people get angry. They blame you. They say you're being weird. This isn't because you've changed. It's because you're no longer serving their purpose. And here's the most ruthless truth. The more accessible you are, the less others value you. Because what's overly abundant becomes emotional garbage. They don't respect anything they don't have to earn. They don't value anything that's always there. So now stop and think. Who truly deserves your time? Who truly deserves your attention, the depth of your being, that genuine listening? Or perhaps the more important question, who deserves your absence? But before answering that, we need to understand something fundamental. Why do we react so much? Why do we give in so easily? What's the real reason behind the desire to respond? Explain, please. The answer lies in what Carl Jung called psychic energy. Think of your mind as a disembodied energy system. Every thought, every emotion, every action consumes some of this energy. The real question is, are you deciding where your energy goes, or are you letting the world decide? With every impulsive reaction, you're wasting your psychic energy. When you defend yourself against criticism that doesn't even deserve attention, when you respond to a provocation just to prove you're right, when you enter meaningless arguments, when you try to please those who never valued you, you're spending your inner strength on things that never nourish you. And Jung was very clear. What you resist persists. The more you react, the more you bind yourself. People living emotionally drained aren't weak. They've just misdirected their energy. So, what happens to someone who's emotionally drained? They become vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, you become easy prey. Manipulative people, opportunistic people, emotionally needy people. They sense this. They realize you don't know how to protect your energy, that you react to everything, that you're trying to fix the world, and they take advantage of it. Jung said this, a healthy psyche is one that knows how to keep energy within the system. This means knowing how to say no without guilt, knowing how to remain silent without feeling cowardly, knowing how to observe before taking action. Because real power doesn't lie in reacting, it lies in being able to choose when and how to act. And this only becomes possible when you know yourself well enough to recognize your own impulses. How many times have you lost sleep over an unresolved conversation? How many times have you spent hours thinking about what you should have said or why someone treated you badly? This is energy being consumed unrequitedly. You're keeping ghosts alive that should have died long ago. You're feeding dynamics that exist only because you insist on reacting. Psychic energy is like a force field. When well protected, it creates presence. You enter a room and command respect without saying a word. But when poorly managed, you become invisible. You become reactive. You become fragile. And the world shows no mercy to those who give in easily. So start observing your own triggers. What makes you react automatically? What causes you to lose your center? These are exactly the points where your energy leaks. And these are the places you need to work on. Not to be cold or indifferent, but to be selective, to be sovereign over yourself. And here's where one of Jung's greatest discoveries comes into play. When you protect your energy, you break the projections others have placed on you, and this disturbs many people deeply, because now you're entering the dark zone of silent manipulation. You think you're in control. You believe your reactions are conscious choices, but the reality is darker. Most of your emotional reactions are programmed, and those who understand this manipulate you easily. Opportunistic people don't need to raise their voices, threaten, or force situations. They just press the buttons you've left exposed, and you react every single time. Carl Jung said that people project onto others what they can't see in themselves. This mechanism he called projection. But there's another, less noticed side to this phenomenon. When others project onto you, you also become the receiver of these images. And the more emotionally accessible you are, the more you become a blank canvas for these projections. You know that friend who only calls when they're in crisis, right? That partner who always expects you to save the day? That person who praises you only as long as you're useful to them? None of this is coincidence. They're not relating to you. They're relating to the role you've agreed to play, to that image of you. So why do you accept it? Because you're afraid of disappointing, of not being loved, of being abandoned. The most effective manipulation doesn't happen through shouting, but in the silence of guilt. When you feel you owe the other person something, when you believe you need to be accessible, even if it tears you apart inside. And here's the central point. The manipulator doesn't need to control you. They just need you to keep reacting the same way. But when you stop reacting, the game breaks. When you start saying no, responding with silence, withdrawing instead of explaining, the projections begin to collapse. The mask they dressed you in falls, and this unsettles people, because they no longer know who you are. Worse, now they have to look at themselves, and not everyone is ready for that. Your inaccessibility is a threat, because it forces others to face their own emptiness. The silence you offer reveals that inner noise they don't want to hear. And then comes the attack, the criticism, the emotional drama. This isn't because you're wrong, it's because you've stopped serving as a suitable mirror. What did Jung say? One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the cycle, the other's shadow begins to emerge. And for those who've always used you as an escape route, this is unbearable. So what about you? Are you ready to be misunderstood for protecting yourself? Are you willing to endure the discomfort of rejection, even attack? Because it's precisely in this silence that a new type of power is born. The modern world is noisy. Everyone wants to be heard, to respond quickly, to win meaningless arguments, to prove they're right, even if it costs them their own peace. But there's a power that few know about, even fewer master, the power of silence. Not the silence of passivity or cowardice, but a conscious, strategic, highly intelligent silence. A silence that's not absence, but a multiplied presence. Jung didn't see silence as emptiness. He saw it as fertile ground for inner transformation. When you stop reacting, you start observing. And by observing, you see patterns never noticed before. Emotional repetitions, manipulation games, self-sabotage cycles. Silence allows clarity, and clarity is dangerous for those who live to control you. Have you ever noticed how some people panic when you don't respond, when you don't explain yourself, when you simply disappear? This isn't because they miss you. It's because your silence takes away their narrative control. While you're talking, you're still in the game. But in silence, you're changing the rules. And this unsettles everyone who feeds on your reaction. Real silence isn't the absence of voice, it's mastery over your own energy. It's refusing to be dragged by someone else's emotions. It's the conscious choice not to enter battles not worth your exhaustion. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires this distancing. Because only in silence can you listen to yourself without the world's interference. But make no mistake, silence has a cost. It will distance you from people who only valued you for the role you played. It will make you incomprehensible to those who only saw you through their own projections. It will make you seem cold, distant, arrogant. But all of this is just a reaction from those who were interested only in your utility, not your depth. And here's the hard truth. As you mature, you become that selective about your words. Because you understand that every sentence is an energetic investment, and not everyone deserves access to your truth. Sometimes silence isn't withdrawal, it's sovereignty. It's the language of those who no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone. Silence is disturbing because it forces the other person to face their own thoughts, their own inner noise. And this discomfort reveals more about them than any argument you could present. You don't need to explain your absence, it explains itself. And those who feel threatened by it are showing how dependent they've been on your instability to maintain their own control. But the most powerful silence isn't the one that disturbs the other. It's the one that rebuilds you from within. The silence that connects you with something beyond external validation. In this inner space, away from others' demands, you begin to reclaim your vital energy, to reconnect with your essence. Understanding these things intellectually is useless if in practice you still continue saying yes when you want to say no, responding to messages that bother you, participating in empty conversations, maintaining relationships that exist only due to inertia. Awareness without action is just another form of self-deception. Real transformation begins when you decisively decide to be selective, and this requires emotional discipline. Conscious inaccessibility isn't about being cold, arrogant, or indifferent. It's about not being accessible always, every moment, for any reason, to everyone. It's about taking control of your own energy, your own time, your own peace. And it starts with small actions, not responding immediately, taking a breath before reacting, walking away from an argument without getting dragged into chaos, turning off your phone without guilt, saying, "Not today," saying, "I'm not interested," saying, "I won't be part of this." But here's the most important part. You don't need to justify your absence. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't owe anyone anything except yourself. And for many people, this is unforgivable. Because when you refuse to explain yourself, you take away the other person's power to keep you in that emotional narrative. That narrative where you're always helpful, understanding, accessible. Carl Jung understood that every process of individuation goes through isolation, not depressive isolation, sacred isolation. A time of inner withdrawal where you learn to listen to your own voice again without the world's interference. A moment when you rebuild your identity not from others' gaze, but from your own center. Want a good measure of your evolution? Observe who starts moving away from you when you become more reserved. Observe who tries to provoke you when you stop reacting. Observe who blames you for changing when you finally start protecting yourself. These aren't signs that you're doing something wrong. They're proof that you're starting to free yourself. Being inaccessible is uncomfortable at first. You'll feel guilty. You'll think you're being selfish. You'll hear that you're being too harsh. But this is part of the deconstruction process. You've been conditioned your whole life to put yourself second. It's natural for change to create discomfort, not just in you, but in everyone who benefited from your old version. Conscious inaccessibility is the foundation of self-determination. When you say no to the world, you say yes to yourself. When you withdraw from a toxic environment, you affirm that your peace is more valuable than any fake connection. And when you stop explaining yourself, you start being respected, even if few people show that respect. But not everyone is ready for this kind of presence because your emotional absence will reveal wounds they don't want to face. It will show how dependent they've been on your emotional chaos to feel in control. And this is when the break comes. And with the break comes pain, loneliness, alienation, the feeling that you're losing something even though you're actually freeing yourself. So what happens next? What comes after distancing? What's born from silence? When you stop being accessible to everyone, something profound begins to happen. First comes silence, an uncomfortable silence that seems to scream inside you. You wonder if you did the right thing, if you're being too harsh, if you're losing people who loved you. But slowly this silence transforms. It begins to purify, to calm, to heal. And then comes loneliness. But not the loneliness of absence, the loneliness of full presence of your own being. The loneliness of the strong, the loneliness of those who no longer betray themselves to keep others close. And in that space where there was once confusion, clarity enters. Where there was once anxiety, peace enters. Where there was once dependency, a new kind of power enters. The power of being whole within yourself. Carl Jung said that the process of individuation requires you to move away from the collective, to separate from the mask, to walk alone for a while. And when you decide to become inaccessible, that's exactly what you're doing. You're not escaping the world, you're returning to yourself. This is precisely when you stop being a reactor and become a creator. You stop being shaped by conditions and start shaping your reality from within. People who are disturbed by your absence are showing they never really wanted you. They wanted the role you played. And now that you no longer fit into it, they don't know what to do with you. And this is liberating. You'll lose people, but you'll find yourself. You'll distance yourself from places, but you'll reconnect with your essence. You'll be misunderstood, but you'll finally start being respected. Because when you're no longer accessible for everything, you become valuable, rare, unforgettable. And make no mistake, this is a rebirth, a new beginning. The beginning of a life where you're no longer accessible for emotional crumbs, mind games, emptiness, disguised as love. Now you only accept what resonates with your peace, your truth, your wholeness. If you've made it this far, it's because a part of you is already ready for this new path. A part of you already understands that being loved means nothing if you have to abandon yourself for it. And that real self-love begins when you choose yourself, even if it costs you being alone for a while. Now, tell me in the comments, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, even hated in the name of your inner freedom? Are you willing to pay the price of being yourself? If this message touched you, if it meant something to you, write "I choose my peace" in the comments. Let's see how many people here are ready for this transition. And remember, keep watching the next video. That video is much more important than you think. See you there.